Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling Podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. Well, seeing how we're pulling Category 6A, the most powerful twisted pair in the world, you gotta ask yourself this one question. Did I pull 295 or 300 feet? Well, do you feel lucky? Do you, punk? What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. The elite professional, knowledgeable, and experienced in leading-edge ICT design principles. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's time for After Hours Live with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. Your favorite place to be on a Thursday night after hours. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. I had to take care of the animals. I'm sitting there getting everything, all the show prepped and everything. I was like, oh my God, the time changed. I got to put the animals to bed. I had to run out there and put the ducks to bed, the chickens to bed, the goats to bed, and the other chickens, the layers to bed. You know, I had to put the dogs up. Man, I tell you what, I was scrambling. Oh, so sorry about that. So Michael's already one step ahead of me. What are you drinking? What are you drinking? So I'm drinking a root beer Zevia soda as usual, because you know it's not, well, technically it is after hours, but you know I don't want to be drinking alcohol during a live show. Michael, how you doing, my friend? Let me see. Forrest is in the house. Hello, Forrest. Glad to see you again, my friend. I see that you're still doing the TDMM stuff on LinkedIn. Glad to see that. So he's drinking his morning tea. Morning tea. So on this show, we like to answer your favorite RCDD questions about installation, certification, design, estimation, project management, career advice, anything to do with careers or working in the ICT industry. For those who don't know what ICT means, that means information communications technology. Information communication technologies. Basically, that's just voice and data cabling for and building automation, digital antenna systems, distributed antenna systems. Sorry about that. So anything has to do with any of that stuff. Now, let's talk about this. The QR code. Right there. There it is. QR code right there. Ding, 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 ding. Click on the QR code if you like this content. Buy me a cup of coffee. Help pay for the cost of hosting the show and doing all this stuff. Those who buy me a cup of coffee get a complete set of podcast stickers and my grateful appreciation. You can also visit through that QR code. You can visit our website. You can visit. You can even schedule 15 minutes with me, one-on-one, after hours, of course. Got to do it after the day job. So yeah, one-on-one call with me, virtual call. How's that sound? Pretty cool, huh? How often do you hear that kind of stuff, right? Now that you had the QR code out of the way, now comes the acronym challenge. The acronym challenge. As you know, I'm known for the acronym challenge. I do an acronym challenge every weekday morning on LinkedIn and some other social media platforms. We are currently in the letter C in the acronym section of the 14th edition of the Telecom Distribution Methods Manual. So here is the acronym for today. It is CATV. CATV. What does that acronym mean? Put your answer in the chat box. So CATV. What does that stand for? I wonder. Nobody's going to take a guess at that one? 10,000 points to Forrest. It stands for cable TV. Cable TV. 10,000 points. Michael got that as well. Forrest was actually first. He beat you by a few seconds there, Michael. Oops, turn that off. There we go. Turn off the acronym challenge. Man, I really need my assistant to be helping me with this stuff. It's hard to do all this stuff around about, right? Now, I do have some questions submitted in advance, so let's go and take care of those. Oh, actually, before we take care of this, did you see this week's episode? I had Wise Components. They have a really cool podcast. Make sure you watch them or listen to them. And I talked to Anthony Romeo about material shortages, about how you could, 10,000 points. You got the other one because he, is it Bobby? I can't read it with my glasses. Community Access Television. That one too. They kind of does for both. Good, 10,000 points for you too, my friend. Anyways, we did a show on material shortages and how to deal with it and gave 3 tips. I suggest you watch that show. Also, I don't do this very often. I probably should do it more often than I do, but I got to give the show some accolades. We're coming up on 1,000 subs on YouTube. We hit 25,000 views on YouTube, and we are coming up on 3,000 followers on TikTok. Yes. That means that the show's message of educating, encouraging, and enriching is resonating with people. Because remember, I'm here to teach you the lessons that I had to learn the hard way so you don't have to learn it the hard way. Does that make sense? Yes, there you go. Also, I'm working on the schedule. I said this last week. I meant to get it done last week, but I got to sit down with the better half to come up with these dates for meetups, live meetups. One in Tampa, one in Miami, one in Jacksonville, one in Orlando. And I will be giving away U-Hand tools. I'll be giving away stickers. I'll be giving away some other stuff as well. So make sure you follow the content to know when we actually publish those dates. That way you can show up. And you get to meet me face to face. So I'll post those dates here real shortly. So let's get on with the question. So the first one comes from Joe. Joe sent to me via Instagram. Now, in a boiled down sense, his question was, how do you deal with material shortages on a project, right? Now, his long form of the question was, he said that, we were issued all of our material at the beginning of a recent project. We ran out of cable and needed more than was estimated. Yet, when I summed up all the footages from the test results, we should have had plenty. I don't want to get my butt chewed out again. What can I do? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out, where did that material go? Now, it's most likely one of 2 things. It was either abuse, right, or theft. More likely abuse. What do I mean by abuse? Abuse means when they were pulling the cables, you probably left too much slack. You left 50 feet of slack in the telecom room when you really should have only been leaving 10 feet of slack in the telecom room, right? Or you're leaving 15 feet, 20 feet of slack at every dropout on the floor. Now, even if the job was estimated to have 10 feet and you're only leaving 15 feet or 20 feet, well, that's only 5 or 10 feet. Multiply by the number of cables. So if you have 2 cables per drop and you have 500 drops, you do the math. That's a lot of cable. So you do have to pay attention to those. And you do have to make sure that, A, you understand exactly how much wastage or slack was left in the job. And B, you need to make sure that your crews understand that as well. Okay. The other reason that you could be missing materials is because of theft. Now, I don't necessarily think that people on your crew is stealing from you. But what happens is, and this happened more than once on a job that I've done, is other trades would see a room full of 200 boxes of cable, and like, well, those low voltage guys will never miss that one box. Well, that one box, if it's Cat 6A, is $400, $500, right? So it's usually other trades. If you're not doing it. So how do you do this? You need to control your material on the job site. Okay. You need to control your material. There's a couple ways that you can do this. And one works as well as the other, pretty much. My preference always has been is if it's a new construction site, have the GC dedicated a certain area, and we would just build our own room and we would lock it down, right? If you don't want to build a room, you can rent Connex trailers, or the boxes that you can actually rent them relatively cheap. Matter of fact, we used to rent two of them quite often. We rent one for the materials and one for the tools, right? That way the tools are always separate from the materials, right? You can even do it, don't put it in a workbox. Somebody says, don't self-deploy materials. 10,000 points to you, Mr. Kalen. Absolutely. So once you've got that secured, now the next step is to have some kind of a sign-out process for the material, and you track it against your production, right? So, for example, when I did a project in Memphis, Tennessee, one of my favorite projects, MCI Rollcom, I knew I had 3 crews, and I knew my guys were installing roughly about 9 to 15,000 feet of cable a day. So every day they had to sign out the amount of materials that they were going to do for that day. And I kept track of that. And then I also kept track of the number of drops that they did. I knew what my average run was. And then I would actually figure out if they were in the ballpark or over the ballpark or under the ballpark, right? Now, when you do that, I also on that particular job, is if they wanted to come back to get more cable, they had to bring me the old spools, the old boxes. That way I know that nothing was going on. They weren't being disappeared. And I knew that stuff was going to be disposed of correctly, right? Somebody says they love MCI work. Could do that all day long. Very good, Only Fiber. Yeah, I loved MCI work as well. Now, I used to work for a company in Northern Virginia. And that company was called TCI in Springfield. No, was it Springfield? Yeah, Springfield. And TCI stood for Telecommunications Concepts Incorporated. I was one of the crews installing cabling. When I was running the cabling, we actually had to keep track of the footages that we ran every single day. And I had to turn that into my boss, right? Now, it's kind of easy. What you do is you just take down your beginning number, your ending number, and then you do the math, and then you turn that in. And then that way they would track that against the project. I knew why they were doing it. One, they were doing it for theft prevention. But more importantly, they were doing it to track against the estimate. So that they said, okay, well, they pulled X amount of 1,000 feet of cable today. There was 3 people on the job site, 8 hours a day. That's 24 hours divided by. So that helped them with their estimates. I understand why they did it. And side note here, funny story. I was just kind of fresh into computers at the time. So we had to keep track of our footage. We had to show the beginning number, the ending number, and the subtract amount and show the actual footage that we pulled. Well, I was doing mine in a spreadsheet because, like I said, I had just gotten into computers and spreadsheets, stuff like that. So I would put my stuff in spreadsheets. And it was funny because about a month or so, the one of the bean counters, one of the head accounting people, came to me and she said, I just want to thank you. And I'm like, why? What I do, right? She goes, your numbers are always spot on. You never have a mistake. And the reason for that is because I was using a spreadsheet. So that's why that kind of helped that. So that's how you keep track of those material shortages. Only Fiber on TikTok asks me, any tips on finding splicing work as a 1099? So here's my tip for you, Only Fiber. Look up the big guys. Go to Hinkles McCoy. Go to Moztec. Go to what's the other one? Black Box, right? And tell them you're a fiber splicer. You want to do 1099. They actually have positions for that. So hook up with the big boys. Just be prepared to already know what your number is and be prepared to negotiate over that, right? Because they will negotiate over that. The second question, this has come from Andy, and he sent it to me via email. And he asks, which tester should I use for pre-installation testing for a spool of fiber? Only Fiber guy. Maybe you might want to chime in here. Now, let's talk about what pre-installation testing is first. Pre-installation testing means you test that spool of fiber before you install it. Okay. Now, there's a couple times this is a really great advantage. The best time to do what you might hear this called spool testing or reel testing, by the way. It's not always called pre-installation testing. So if you're doing spool testing, you want to do this test when that tractor trailer pulls up to your office before you sign and accept the material. Okay? Because once you sign that material, you're on the hook for it if it's bad. If you shoot it before you sign that bill of materials, then if it's bad, then you can say, no, I'm not accepting this, and you can send it back. That narrows down the responsibility of if there's a problem with that cable. And it's going to happen. Stuff gets damaged during shipping. The manufacturer tests the cable before they ship it to you. As a matter of fact, they ship the test results to you with the spool, right? So shoot it while it's still on the back of the tractor trailer before you sign acceptance for that. Another time when you might want to do spool testing is if every low voltage company has this. They have a warehouse, and in the warehouse they got leftover spools from projects for the last 10 years, right? So if you happen to see a spool of fiber in the warehouse that you want to use because you don't want to go buy new material because for lots of reasons you're trying to maximize the profit or get some of that, because that material sitting in the warehouse is like money sitting in a bank, but you're not getting paid interest for it. So that spool of fiber has been sitting in the warehouse for, I don't know, a year or 2, 3, 5 years. Well, who knows how many times that spool's been moved around in the warehouse? Who knows if it's been damaged? So that's another time when you might want to do that spool test or that reel test, right? Even though you're not required. Sometimes a customer, as part of the contract, is going to require you to do spool testing for that very reason, right? Now, why are you going to do the spool testing? Number one, the biggest thing is you're doing it to make sure that the cable, for example, my first example by the tractor trailer coming in, you're doing it to make sure that the cable was not shipped during transit, okay? Making sure it's not shipped, because again, if you test it before you sign the bill of materials, if you do that before the bill of materials, then what's going to happen is they're responsible for replacing it. Oh, sorry, somebody keeps calling my phone. Again, if you're doing it with a spool that's in the warehouse, well, then you're doing it to make sure that you don't pull the fiber and then end up having to replace the fiber later, right? Again, like I said, some new manufacturers are going to require you to do that just to make sure that there's no defects. Now, like I said, the manufacturer tests that fiber before they send it to you to make sure there's no factory defects. So when they send that test results, what you want to do is when you shoot that spool, you want to compare the loss that you are getting compared to the loss that they got on the test results. And they should match. Pretty stinking close, they should match. Okay. Now let's get to your question. You asked, which tool should you use? And it kind of really depends on the level of accuracy you're looking for and the amount of detail that you're looking for. So I'm going to go through the tools that you can use, starting with my preferred one, working down to my least preferred one. My preferred one is going to be to shoot it with an OTDR. Okay. Now, if you're a fiber person, you probably have a fusion splicer floating around the office somewhere. If not, they've got mechanical splices. You don't really care about the loss of the splice. You're just looking at that trace as it goes down through the spools, right? So the OTDR is going to be my preferred one. That OTDR is going to give you the length of the cable. It's going to give you the total attenuation, right? And it will also tell you if there's any breaks or damages within that cable. The advantage, and this is why the OTDR is my favorite. The reason the OTDR is my favorite is let's say, for example, you have a spool of fiber in the warehouse that you've been trying to get rid of for a while. You finally got a project where you can use it. It's a 1,000-foot spool. You bring it down off the shelf, you fusion splice a pigtail onto it, or you do some mechanical splice to it so you can hook it to your OTDR, and then you shoot it, and you find that 1,000-foot spool has damaged fiber at 750 feet in. 750 feet in. Well, the run you're getting ready to do is only 250 feet, right? Well, you can still take that spool out to the job site and do that run at 250 feet because you're still going to be 500 feet away from that damaged spot on the fiber, right? Because you've already shot it with the OTR. You know there's no problems from 0 feet to 250 feet. So that way you can still maybe make use of some material in the warehouse that you may not necessarily know or that you could do. And again, save you money, right? Now, that whole scenario is based on an assumption that you can't return that spool, right? If that spool's been sitting in your warehouse for 2 years, you're not going to be able to return it. The next one is going to be using an optical loss test set. Again, now it's step 2. This is my second favorite way to do it. An optical loss test set consists of a power meter and a light source. Again, you can do the same thing. You can do mechanical splice onto that spool. I would do every strand, by the way. Some people only do one strand. I would do every strand. And then you're going to shoot it, and it's going to give you the actual attenuation results. Here's the problem. Again, you can compare those results to what the test results from the manufacturer said. The problem with an optical loss test set is, well, you can calculate how much loss that amount of footage should have based on, for example, you're allowed to lose 1.5 dB per kilometer at 1300 for multi-mode fiber. So you can calculate how much loss it should have. So if that number is high, then you know there's a problem with it. But the problem with an optical loss test set is you don't know where that problem is. Is it in that first 10 feet or is it in the last 10 feet? Going back to my example where I said I got that 1,000-foot spool of fiber and I want to try to use it. That OTR told me the break is at 750 feet in, right? With an optical loss test set, I'm not going to know where that break is. I can try to calculate where it is, but there might be some other things causing that as well. So got to be careful with that. And then my least favorite way is to use a VFL, a visual fault locator, or an optical flashlight. Actually, I have one in my desk drawer. I don't know if I think I mentioned this before. I don't know if I mentioned. I don't remember or not. I was talking to a student in a class recently, and I asked about optical flashlight stuff, and they recommended this one off of Amazon. I got it now, so just love this thing, man. I've been playing with it with a lot of the fiber I have here around the house. Now, this will just tell you of continuity all the way through it, but it won't tell you the loss on that fiber. It won't, and we'll tell you some other things as well. So again, preferred OTDR. Don't have an OTR, optical loss test set. Don't have that, then go with the VFL. Okay, that's my preferred method for doing that process. Now comes the next question. No, actually, this is technically not a question. This was a post I did on TikTok. So I did, and actually, it's on TikTok, it's on YouTube, it's on Instagram as well. I did a video where somebody had ran some cables up into a vent. They were using the vent as the cable pathway. So I put that video up, and this guy got tagged in. I think his name was Almost Engineer. He got tagged in it. And he said, "Oh, well, you can run Ethernet cables in a duct system as long as it's plenum." So I had to respond to that. You can't. And the reason you can't is because it's a code violation. It's 800.113 paragraph B. That paragraph talks about the installations of wires and cables, and that paragraph B specifically addresses ducts, specifically for fabricated or environmental air systems. Okay. And it says that you can use plenum cable, but you could, number one, that cable has to be directly associated with the air distribution system, not the network, the air distribution system. So it's got to be part of the HVAC system, and it can only run for 1.22 meters or roughly about 4 feet. That's a code violation. And the reason for that is because cable, a listed cable has to be tested against the NFPA standards. And the standard that most commonly used is the 262 standard, the NFPA 262, which is the standard method for testing for flame and smoke travel for cables and wires in air handling spaces. And there's a pass-fail criteria. So the cable has to have a maximum spread distance of 5 feet and cannot have more smoke emission than peak optical density of 0.5 and a maximum of 0.15. So if that cable is running through that duct system, and there was I think about 6 or 8 of them going through that duct system. Well, again, burning a cable is like, I know you've never done this, right? I know it's just me. I know I'm the pyro, but I used to take straws and I would light one end on a fire, right? Or do this. I used to do this with model cars, and what would happen is it would kind of like drip, and that straw would burn until it got to the other end, until it burnt your fingers. Cable's the same way. When cable gets caught on fire on one side, it will continue to burn until it gets to a fire stop system or a break in the cable or somebody puts it out. Now think about that. If you got that cable running through the duct system, now it's just this is burning all that cable, all that smoke, all that toxic off gases. Now, granted, yes, it's a plenum cable, but again, it's not allowed to be there. Another place where it's also against the code, 800.24. 800.24. 800.24 is the mechanical execution of work clause in the National Electrical Code Book. And it states in that section, and I'm paraphrasing, that the work's got to be done in a neat and workmanlike manner. It's got to be done in a neat and workmanlike manner. Somebody tell me, what is a neat and workmanlike manner? Could my view of neat and workmanlike manner be different from somebody brand new in the industry? Or somebody who ran the cables through the ductwork? Yes, it is. It's absolutely going to be different. My point of view would be different from yours, would be different from Joe Blow out in the field. So that kind of left a really huge gray area. So inspectors used to use this against us low voltage people all the time. I did a project one time in Prince George's County, Maryland for Jack Wooten. And we ran some cables and they came off of the red iron and they kind of did an angle to the wall to come down. And he said that was not a neat and workmanlike manner. I had to go fix it because in his opinion, it wasn't a neat and workmanlike manner. Now, the beautiful thing is they kind of, I think they did it in the 2017 code book, maybe the 2014. I'd actually have to look it up. But they did put a fine print note under 800.24. A fine print note, for those who don't know, it's not enforceable by the code. It's just additional information to help you understand what that part of the code book is trying to tell you. So the fine print note for 800.24 says accepted industry practices, or neat and workmanlike manner is accepted industry practices as described by the ANSI standards. Okay. So now at least you have something to compare to. And I'll tell you where this saves us problems. Dressing cable. We in the past, we used to love the cable comb our bundles, make them look nice and pretty. When Cat 6A first came out, we wanted to randomize them because of alien crosstalk. There was a lot of electrical inspectors that were failing projects because they were used to seeing us dress everything nice and beautifully, but now it's just laying in there randomly, all messed up. So they say, that's not a neat and workmanlike manner. Well, then you can go to the standard and say, look, Cat 6A said it had to be done in randomization. We've since changed that, but at least there's a published document that says it's got to be done that way. Now, again, that doesn't make the standards code, okay? Just because it references it in the code book. I told you, remember, it's a fine print note. Fine print notes are just additional information to help clarify something that might be quite so clear. Does that make sense? Okay. Question number 4. This comes from Juan via email. Juan says, why can't I just lay cable on a ceiling grid? And that's because it's a code violation. Today's code day for some reason. 800.21. It says, but by the way, that section's titled Access to Electrical Equipment Behind Panels Designed to Allow Access. That's the title for that section, 800.21. And it says that access to electrical equipment shall not be denied by an accumulation of wires and cables that prevents the removal of panels, including suspended ceiling panels. So you can't just lay cables on the grid because it is a code violation. Matter of fact, the code book says you have to have 3 inches of clearance above that ceiling grid. Now, why does the code say this? The code says this because you have to be able to get up into the ceiling. You have to have access to the ceiling to go do your work. The inspector has to be able to open up that ceiling tile to get into the ceiling to inspect your work. We all have seen the jobs. There's the Department of Commerce, Washington, D.C., way back in the day, back in the 90s, when I was putting in dual RG59 coax. I'm telling you, there were some tiles you could not lift up because there was so much coax laying on the ceiling tiles. That's a code violation. You can't get into the ceiling to do the work. The inspector can't get into the ceiling to inspect your work. And all that weight on the ceiling grid, which is not designed to support that weight, that is an accident just waiting to happen. Just waiting to happen. Here's another reason why you don't want to just lay cables on the ceiling grid. And a lot of people don't think about this. I do because I used to be a volunteer firefighter. After the fire department puts out the fire in the room, the next thing they're going to do is called checking for extension. That means they're going to open up the ceiling to go into the ceiling to see if the fire leaped into the interstitial space of the ceiling. Okay? If they can't get into the ceiling because they'll think they can't do their job. And again, remember, that's a lot of weight on that ceiling grid that's not designed to support that ceiling grid. If that ceiling collapses, it could kill or injure a firefighter, or worse, well, what's worse than getting killed? It could entangle their gear, right? Their breathing apparatus. And then they can't get out of the building. For some reason, I'm not sure why, local authorities having jurisdiction don't like it when their firefighters get injured. They really frown upon that. They really frown upon that. All right, so I finished the final submitted questions. Let's switch over to the chat box. Mr. Forrest, he asks, let me ask for a pool box size. Do we must follow the pool box size guidelines, which is indicated in the TDM Chapter 5 for horizontal distribution systems? That's a starting point for me. Starting point. I would actually even go larger if I could, right? Now, his next question is, what if it's too big to install in the ceiling? Okay, so remember, the TDMM is a best practice. It's not code, okay? Remember, there's codes that you have to follow. There's standards that are voluntary, and then there's best practices, right? Now, codes are for safety, standards are for performance, and best practices for the ultimate performance. If you can't go with the best practice, then go with a smaller one if you can. But keep in mind, do not exceed your bend radiuses, Forrest, because that's going to cause you a lot of problems. A lot of problems, right? All right, so going on to the next one down here. So Michael says, I listened to that one on my way to work. That was informative and very knowledgeable man. Yes, Anthony Romeo is a very knowledgeable person. Mark is in the house. Hello, Mark. How are you doing, my friend? Glad to see you back. So another question, Sarah. So in the CEC code, we can run it so long as it's part of the duct system and it's rated for it. I am not familiar with the CEC, so I'd actually have to look that up. I don't have a copy of the Canadian Electrical Code book, but in the NEC, you can only run through it if it's directly for the air duct system. And again, only that 1.22 meters or 4 feet. So Jasmine's in the house. Jasmine, my brand spanking new RCDD. She says it's safety for the firemen was always number one reason I was told, and I couldn't lay it on the ceiling grid. And that's exactly right. Exactly right. All righty. I am at, whoa, I went past my 30 minutes. Oops. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so next Thursday night, there will not be an After Hours Live. It's Thanksgiving week. Taking off. So it won't be After Hours next Thursday night. But I still accept questions, so make sure you send me the questions, and I'll do them the week after Thanksgiving. All righty? Till next time, everybody, remember, knowledge is power. Yes.